You found it. It's the real news with your host, David Knight.
Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to John Rappaport. I was just informed that there is a massive demonstration outside the U.S. Embassy in Istanbul, the capital of Turkey. Part of the Day of Rage, I guess, angry about the announcement about the embassy, the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. You know what? Maybe we should move the Istanbul Embassy to Jerusalem for safekeeping instead of leaving it in Istanbul. But I want to talk to John about the perjury trap, as David Stockman puts it. He says the FBI's perjury trap of the century. And David Stockman says this is a perjury trap designed and set by John Brennan, Jim Comey, Sally Yates, Peter Strzok, and a passel of deep state operatives. It was set up to snare Mike Flynn as a first step in relitigating and reversing the verdict of the voters in the election. What do you think about that, John?
That's a pretty heavy charge. Yeah. You know, I would say that it all started with the idea in mass media. We know that Trump colluded with Putin and vice versa, and the whole election was a hoax. Of course, we know this. Now, we can just go to the particulars, you see. So if Mike Flynn, after the election, was talking to the Russian ambassador, well, that's just another sign of the collusion, which we already assume to be true. Because if you don't make that assumption in the first place, then the fact that he, as the incoming national security advisor, is talking to the Russian ambassador is business as usual. Who cares? I mean, that's what you would expect. That's not a crime. There's nothing suspicious or illegal about it. It's only when you start to make this completely unwarranted generalization that, yes, we know the whole election was fixed. Now you can begin to direct suspicion. And sure, they surveilled the phone call or the phone calls that Flynn had. They looked at the contents and they decided, okay, we can make something out of this.
Yeah.
So now
they hold this meeting, and he was reportedly surprised that he was going to be. That it was about this. It's like some guys call him up. He's 2 days in the administration. Hey, we'd like to come over and talk to you. And all of a sudden it turns into an interrogation. He doesn't have his lawyer there. But they've got a transcript of all this stuff that's there.
Exactly. So this is called parallel construction, where you do something illegal, you spy on somebody you don't have the right to spy on, in this case, Flynn. You learn whatever you can, and then you pretend that you're just starting an investigation without all that information, and you go to his house and you say, you know, did you have a conversation with the Russian ambassador? Or, yeah, a few days after the election. Well, yeah, I did. Really? Wow. What was that all about? And then you begin the entire interrogation, and you just drive him up against the wall.
And you may not even know that this is part of an official interrogation. You know, you're just talking to an FBI agent, you know, and it's like, you know, like I said before, you played the Monty Python thing. What's your favorite color? Blue. Oh, no, red. No. Oh, you just lied to me. I'm an FBI agent. You're done.
Yeah, exactly. Or you might suspect, if you were Flynn, that they were gathering information on the Russian ambassador until all of a sudden the conversation begins to turn. You know, I wrote a piece actually based on something that Paul Watson wrote at InfoWars. Obama, before he was elected, during the campaign, imagine this, sent a guy named McFaul to Russia to give talks, to talk with officials there, to talk about Ukrainian policy and the future of U.S.-Russian relations and so forth. This was in October of 2008, before Obama was even elected. Talk about interfering with the policy of another government. I mean, you know, and nothing happened. The press didn't even consider it was significant. But here, Flynn has a conversation with the Russian ambassador, completely understandable and relevant, and all of a sudden he's some kind of traitor.
Yes. It's incredible. But, you know, we're talking about how they've already got their mind made up. I think the perfect example of this is an article that I mentioned earlier in the show from Max Boot. It's on foreign policy. And, of course, Max Boot, people who don't know who he is guess what, a Russian-American. He is a CFR member, Council on Foreign Relations. He's a neocon globalist, a never-Trumper, a guy who says he's a conservative Republican, but, he's pro-abortion, he's open borders, and so forth and so on. But he says, here's the title of the article, John, Trump is guilty. And then the subtitle is, the only remaining question is what he's guilty of. So they got to go search. I mean, that encapsulates everything that this investigation is about. I cannot believe how incredibly biased this is, but Max Boot just lays it out there for us, right there.
Yeah, right. We know he's guilty. Gee, I wonder what he's guilty of. Let's try to figure that out. Right. Yeah, this is real. Well, we started talking about the surveillance state. I mean, you can see from this Flynn affair how vicious this can be, because the NSA and other agencies have the capacity to spy on anybody, everybody, all the time, and to sift and collate that data and come up with whatever information they want, and then twist that information to imply some crime has been committed, and then pretend that they're now starting an investigation of that crime over here without the prior knowledge of the surveillance, and just cook up an entire fake scenario about the commission of a crime.
Yes.
I mean, and in the process of all of this, have you noticed that the whole, there was a small wave, even in the mainstream, about, I'm going to say 2 months ago, that, maybe the Clinton Foundation would actually get investigated now. That's completely disappeared. We're not hearing anything about that anymore, where the big crimes are.
Senator Grassley's furious about that, and he went on and he said, there's a double standard here. The way they desperately want to go after the president, but they ignore all other potential wrongdoings in the previous administration, as well as with Hillary Clinton. And he said, I talked to Dianne Feinstein, my counterpart on this committee, and she won't even go there. No, not even going to talk about that. So he goes, this questions the very heart of the integrity of our federal law enforcement and justice system. The FBI, the Department of Justice, and the secret surveillance state. People are seeing this corruption now, and something has to be done about it.
Yeah. Since 2000, the FBI, and these were mainstream articles in the press in the year 2014, the FBI had cooked the evidence in their forensic lab on thousands of cases of Americans who were sent to jail based on that evidence.
You're right.
Thousands of cases,
yes.
Including a complete distortion of the evidence in the Oklahoma City bombing case.
Yes.
Where the head of the FBI lab was told to assume that the explosion was out of the Ryder truck. It was an ammonium nitrate plus fuel oil bomb, because that's what the FBI was saying out in the field. And he was to look at all evidence in light of that and that alone and come up with that conclusion. Well, put these two, explosive elements, so to speak, together. The surveillance state and a crooked FBI forensic lab. What are you going to get? You're going to get multiple numbers of political witch hunts and prosecutions based on completely fake evidence. That's what you're going to get.
Well, you're talking about thousands of people wrongfully convicted. You talked about parallel construction. All that type of stuff was happening to those of us down at the grassroots level for a very long time. The politicians didn't care. Now it is coming to them. Now this corrupt Justice Department, law enforcement, surveillance state is now turning on, as Michael Hayden said, the interesting people. He said, no, we're not interested any longer in bad people. We're interested in interesting people. And the most interesting people are the ones at the top, the ones who could have stopped this when it was focused on all of us down at the grassroots level. But now they're in the crosshairs.
That's the power of the surveillance state. You could say the NSA is the president of the United States.
That's right.
Because if they control that much information, they can decide who to prosecute, who to discredit, who to extort or blackmail at any level of the interesting people, from celebrities to politicians to judges to whatever. And
I think the good news is, John, as I mentioned earlier, that I think finally President Trump understands this. This is coming from The Intercept, that Trump White House is weighing plans for private spies in order to counter deep state enemies. I mean, this is the civil war that is going on in our country, the corruption and the power. William Binney, when he was on, said, this is the Praetorian Guard. The Praetorian Guard was originally set up to protect the emperor. Then it turned out that it created the emperor. That's the real problem here, isn't it?
This is a gigantic war with intelligence agencies, you bet.
Yes, yes. Well, that's all the time we've got. Thank you so much for joining us. John Rappaport, you can find him nomorefakenews.com. You can also find John on Twitter at John Rappaport. Thank you so much for joining us, John. Always interesting to talk to you. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight.
In ancient times, man roamed the earth in a constant state of hunting or being hunted. Introducing Caveman, where cutting-edge science meets ancient super nutrients. Secure your bottle right now at InfoWarsStore.com.